Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 315, and we're going to talk about Zelensky's false flag of desperation and some other things. As you know, I try to make these videos or these recordings based on current events and try to give you my subjective spin on it. But I do try to take also try to talk about things that are not talked about by everybody else, just to keep things a little bit interesting for you. But anyway, this morning I was listening. So at our school, and as all schools in the morning, they have a kind of news video that all the students get to watch to keep up with world events and also to keep them entertained for about 10 minutes. And the lead story today was about a drone strike on the nuclear reactor in Chernobyl. Okay. And so I came home and I talked about it with my sixth graders, right? In the homeroom, I have sixth graders. And so I said, hey, this is a false flag attack. And I don't know if they understood what I was saying, but I tried to walk them through how to know if something is probably not true, that it's questionable, and you probably should do some more research. So we'll get into that. But anyway, I came home and I looked up on Yahoo News. I basically looked up the attack, and it wasn't everywhere. It was only on certain websites, but Yahoo News was covering it, and this is their title: Chernobyl shelter takes significant damage in Russian missile strike. And significant damage is in quotations, and this is something that Zelenskyy had said. And so this is Chernobyl, where there was a nuclear meltdown. I'm sure you may have heard it in history, but it was a nuclear reactor that had a meltdown, and all the scientists who were working there tried to save the rest of the world, and so they tried to figure out how to stop the leak, and they all ended up dying. But what the world did was they created this concrete dome to cover the bad reactor. And so to sort of keep all the radiation within the dome, right? So obviously, if you break the dome, put a crack in it, then all the radiation will come out. So, you know, I'll read from the article. Okay. So far, the radiation levels have not changed. But just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here, so the nuclear reactor, which had a meltdown, radiation was, coming out everywhere. It was dangerous. It was harmful. It was toxic. So people built this huge concrete dome to cover the entire reactor and a large part of that area to sort of contain all of the radiation. And it was that dome, which they call a shelter, which was hit by a missile. It turns out it was a drone. So a drone struck the dome, and Zelensky wants us to believe that the Russians did it. So here are some lines from the article. I'll read just a few lines. Mr. Zelensky wrote on social media last night, a Russian attack drone with high explosive warheads struck the shelter protecting the world from the radiation at the destroyed fourth power unit of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The only country in the world that attacks such sites, occupies nuclear power plants, and wages war without any regard for the consequences is today's Russia. Every night, Russia carries out such attacks on Ukraine's infrastructure and cities. Russia continues to expand its army and shows no change in its deranged anti-human state rhetoric. This means that Putin is definitely not preparing for negotiations. He is preparing to continue deceiving the world. That is why there must be unified pressure from all who value life, pressure on the aggressor. Russia must be held accountable for its actions, end quote. So why is Zelensky, or as I like to affectionately call him, Zanazi, why is he doing these things? right? Because clearly Russia is winning the war, right? There's no way that Russia is losing the war, and also that Zelensky has to call on the world to pressure Russia to be accountable for its actions, right? If Russia was losing, then they wouldn't need to exert more pressure because he was already losing. Also, I saw a clip, a video montage of, all these people saying that Russia already lost, and that was like 2 years ago, right? So Russia lost 2 years ago, so why are they still fighting? It's pretty nuts. So, why is Zelenskyy doing this? Well, because Trump has started peace talks with Putin. They had a phone call not that long ago, and then Rubio and Lavrov both are, basically uh, Secretary of State level people of the two respective countries, and they met in Saudi Arabia for 4.5 hours. All right. The meeting was 4.5 hours, and apparently everyone involved said it was a really great meeting. Now, the EU, the European Union, was not there, nor was Zelensky, excuse me, Zelensky. He wasn't there either. And so it's kind of interesting. Like, this is a war in Ukraine. Why wasn't Zelensky there? Well, because Russia doesn't recognize Zelensky, because he's not the legitimate president of the Ukraine. And why do you say that? Well, because he canceled elections. He said, no, we can't have elections during wartime. So he canceled the elections, right? And so I think he did it more because he's extremely unpopular in Ukraine. I mean, he's the one that's ordering soldiers to kidnap boys off the street and throw them in the front lines where they die almost immediately. So why would you vote for this clown, right? There's no way. So I think he has zero support from Ukrainians. And so if they did have an election, he'd be voted out. And so that's why he had to cancel elections. And apparently the EU Commission, right? I've tried to understand it. It's because I never really concerned myself with the European Union, but now Daniel McAdams, when he was talking with Ron Paul, he said that the people on the European Commission, right, are unelected. And I looked it up, and it, I thought they were the European Parliament, but European Parliament is something different. And then on top of the European Parliament are the individual governments of each country. So how does all this work? I don't know. It's just so it's government on top of government and on top of government. And of course, everyone is forced to pay for everything that they do. And so politicians' salaries, of course, are extremely high. And so there's a lot of government over there in Europe. But the European Commission itself, they are apparently appointed. And so Ursula von der Leyen is president of the European Commission, and they convened a meeting, and they were very upset with the United States not including them in the talks, uh, which is kind of interesting, right? So um, they were like protesting the fact that Ukraine nor the new EU were invited to these peace talks. They deserve to be there, so they say. Uh, and a lot of leaders in Europe have come out and said, "Oh no, Ukraine will be in NATO, and they will send troops to help Zelensky in the Ukraine, because if they don't, then Russia will take over all of Europe, right? Which is totally absurd. Ain't gonna happen, right? So, what are we looking at here? So the Europeans are basically saying that they can do it on themselves, do it by themselves without America. If America is going to drop out of the war, well, the European Union will step up to the plate. But what is NATO without the United States? What is the European Union without the United States? I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's much of anything, right? Because as we can see from the audits that are coming out and will come out, that a tremendous amount of monetary support is coming from the United States, and that without the United States, they don't have that large of a military, right? A lot of the countries, because the United States was providing military protection, allowed their own military to sort of atrophy, not be that big, especially England. Apparently, England doesn't have, um, you know, much of an army at all right now, much less an army to be able to fight in the Ukraine. And so, without the United States, what can they do? And so Trump already said he wants to be out of NATO, wants to be out of the United Nations. So, I mean, what are these countries going to do by themselves? And it just doesn't really seem to make sense. So a lot of it is moral posturing. All right. And getting back to why this is a false flag, I don't, I'm pretty sure I haven't gone over it. But if so, oh, right. So if Russia was losing, this is a desperate attempt to somehow get at the Ukrainians. But it's largely ineffective. And if they were losing so badly, then why would Ukraine need a European army to go after Russia if they were losing anyway, right? So that doesn't make any sense. But if it's true, what a lot of the political outsiders have been saying is that it's the Ukrainians that have extremely heavy losses, 1 million soldiers dead, right, or injured, incapable of returning to battle, well, then the loss of life is tremendous on the Ukrainian side, right? A hugely unpopular war. And now all of a sudden the United States is going to bring an end to the war, which means that people like Zelensky will now be exposed for all of the corruption, the what do you call it? The skimming, right? The taking of money that is sent to Ukraine, putting it in his own pocket, all of that will come to light. And apparently, I mean, I haven't really followed it before, but puppets of the United States, once they've outlived their usefulness, they just get assassinated, right? They have an accident somehow. And so this is probably what Zelensky is freaking out about. And so he needs the war to continue. And so, what is the best way to do that? Well, you're going to have an attack on a very dangerous target, and you're going to blame it on Russia, right? Zelensky has done this already early in the war. Ukrainians massacred a whole bunch of people at this little town called Bucha, and they blamed the Russians for it. But clearly, it was not the Russians that did it. It was the Azov battalion, right? The Nazi portion of the Ukrainian army. They are the ones that did it. They killed all the collaborators, people who collaborated with the Russians when they were there. So right. So false flag attacks, misreporting who actually did certain kinds of things. Yeah, that's totally what Ukraine does. So so that was that. It was a desperate attempt to drag the United States back into the war, to get the American people outraged and said, "Oh, Putin must go once again." But it didn't seem to work this time, right? So people are over it. Um, and that's why they elected Trump, right? Because he promised that he was going to end the war. Gerald Celente has been saying that if peace talks ever begin, then Zelensky will do a major, huge, big false flag. I don't think this is the last false flag. I think he's going to up it, right? He's going to do it again, something catastrophic. But of course, it'll be for nothing because everyone will know that it's him that's doing all of these things, okay? So it's insanity. I cannot believe that people are still supporting him. I can't believe that a lot of people I know from high school and college are still believing all of this propaganda when it is absolutely obvious that it is just simply propaganda. Which takes me to Romania, and it sort of flew under the radar. And I forget who was what. Oh, it was. I think it was. I was listening to a Jimmy Dore episode, and they were commenting on JD Vance's speech, right? And how and so Jimmy Dore mentioned how Romania basically annulled the election results, right? So they're all talking about democracy, and the United States has that National Endowment for Democracy to spread democracy, but you don't get democracy, you get fascism, right? Which I mean, democracy is right part of it's related to fascism, so it's not totally wrong. So CNN had an article, and it was, I believe the title was "Top Court Annuls Presidential Election Result Because of a Far Right Victory." Right? What? A far right? Wait. So the court can annul a democratically elected president because of the political party that he's affiliated with. Why not just round up everyone who's far right and make it impossible for that? It's just weird. So far right these days, obviously, is someone like Trump, someone who wants to bring sanity back into the country. Even in Germany, anyone who looks like they're popular, anti-establishment, pro-peace, they are branded as being far right, basically to imply that they're a bunch of Nazis, right? And so they annul the election. And so he's no longer president, which is just absolutely insane. I can see that happening in Germany as well. I think that the front runner German party is also labeled as far right. And so, therefore, I think if the far right does actually win the election, however the elections are over there, they will probably also annul those election results. I think in England, one of the big opposition leaders in England is sitting in jail already right now because of his popularity, probably. And so in Germany and in England, people are getting arrested for social media posts. I mean, in England, it has been going on for a while. Anyone who says anything hostile against the government, against any kind of popular government policy, yeah, they end up in the sin bin, right? So they're in jail. And so these countries are censoring uh, to basically protect people, but really it is to protect authoritarianism. And it's really weird to look at, right? So you're going to see people say, yeah, yeah, this is to preserve democracy because those guys are so evil. And I guess because they really believe that certain people are evil, that they think that they are fighting Hitler again. But because people have sloppy definitions, because they believe they're bad, twisted, moralizing and virtue signaling, it becomes like this, where they become the Nazis that go after people who are trying to live in peace, right? I mean, it's so bad these days that Babylon Bee had a post where it said that Trump is the first fascist to reduce the size of government because obviously fascists are all about increasing the size of government. And it's not funny to the left, right? It's not funny to all the people who hate Trump because they have no sense of humor. And I've talked about this before in my episodes that talk about humor, but because their whole position is something of a satire. It's something ridiculous, that it is a joke in and of itself. And so you can't laugh at what is absurd, right? Because that is their political position, which is why they have no jokes, right? They have no sense of humor at all. And that's pretty pathetic, right? And so they have become the Nazis to terrorize and to go after people who want to simply be free. In class, I would always have, oh, by the way, my hearing is on Tuesday. I think I mentioned that. And, you know, I was informed that the university lawyers are going to come at me to try to rattle my cage. So we'll see how that goes. But it brought to mind a student that I had who I believe participated in some of the, um, Antifa riots that took place a couple of years ago. I have a feeling because of his enthusiasm when I asked the question, so is it okay to punch a Nazi in the face? And he enthusiastically said, of course. right? I mean, he was all about that, right? And so I said, okay, so what's a Nazi? And he couldn't explain it to me, right? And so that's the thing. A lot of people, a Nazi is just someone I hate, someone, a bad person. Well, who's a bad person? Well, someone told me that that person is a bad person, and so I'm going to punch him in the face, right? But they know nothing. But he was intelligent enough that when I put the question to him, he realized he knew nothing. And when I began to explain that Nazi is just simply the the first two syllables of the German word for national, national, right? But the German political party, all right, Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterspartei, right? The National Socialist German Workers' Party is too long to say. So you're just going to use the first two syllables. So Nazi, right? And so that's all it is. And you're a National Socialist. In other words, if you are socialist, you are closer to being a Nazi than someone who is pro-free market, right? And once you explain that, it's like this thing where they're trying to compute and at the end of the semester, he sent me a nice email and said, he has to go back and rethink everything. Everything that he had believed was true. He had to rethink. And I'll take that. I'll take that as a victory, right? Because it wasn't yelling and screaming at me all throughout the semester, but we had really rational discussions. And I don't know, I think he enjoyed the class as well. So even in America, this could have been our fate, what's happening in England and in Germany, right? If Musk didn't get X, if Rumble wasn't there for people to upload their videos, if Trump didn't win the election, we can go on. It's so many ifs, right? Then we would be in that place where if we post something, people will be showing up at our door. I mean, it happens sometimes here, right? And I think it would happen a lot on a much higher frequency. It would happen everywhere, right? It would on certain levels because every state has solidly blue neighborhoods, and so I'm sure that they would start doing that. They would start going after people. And but now we have Trump was elected, and he is going blitzkrieg, which might be an unfortunate thing to say because Blitzkrieg, Lightning War, was the military strategy of the Germans in World War II. One might associate that with Nazism, but nevertheless. So Trump is going so fast in so many different areas that the Democrats just simply do not know where to take a stand, right? Because it's happening everywhere all at once. And then I saw a tweet from Musk that a big bombshell is coming, and apparently it might have something to do with $2 trillion that are unaccounted for. So forget about the hundreds of millions and the billions that, are turning up like, oh, we're wasting it on this, we're spending it on that. No, $2 trillion is unaccounted for. And so I say to them, they got to keep going. Don't let up, not at all. There's a scene in Remember the Titans. Just look at the movie, forget about the real actual story. But in the movie, when they are in the championship and they're winning, they're blowing out their opponent. And at one point, the one coach says to the other, it says, run up the score, take away all of the doubt. Because if the score is close, people might say, oh, they could have lost. It just happened to go their way. But you want it so complete. You want the victory to be so lopsided that the other side could never, ever recover. And so I think with Trump and Musk, that's what they got to do. They have to put everything beyond the shadow of a doubt so that the people who continue to oppose them look like utter morons so that even their children are embarrassed at their parents. And so those next generation will be interested in and supporting the ideas of freedom. At least that's what I'm hoping for. And that's it for this episode. I'll talk to you next time.